Om Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we will go on to the next verse of Upadesha Saram, which is verse number 14. We had done up to verse number 13 in the last class. So please unmute yourself and chant with me. Pranabandhana Lina Manasam Ekachintana Nashametad Ekachintana Nashametyadah Okay. So today has been a long day for you guys. I know most of you. You have had Tanmai's chanting class also. But it's a good day being Ekadashi. So let's see what the lines mean. So look at the second half of the first line, that is the second quarter. Lina Manasam. So we talked about this Nasham and Linam, Manasa Nasham, Manasa Linam in the last verse. Linam is basically temporary destruction, temporary resolution. So Lina Manasam, the mind is resolved temporarily. How? Prana Bandhanat, by the practice of binding the prana, which is called Prana Bandhanam. What is the other name for that?
Pranayama.
Pranayama. Prana Ayama. Ayama means control, which means bandhanam. Prana is prana. So prana bandhana is pranayama. Then you have to break this up carefully. Eka chintanat nasham adaha eti. So that breakup is important. Nasham. You can see in the verse it is nasham et yadaha. So that nasham et yadaha is nasham eti adaha. That breakup is important. So Lina Manasam, the mind is temporarily resolved by prana bandhanam, by pranayama. And adaha. So this adaha has to be connected to the entire first line, which means that troublesome mind, adaha, which has been temporarily resolved through the practice of pranayama. So the very important word, adaha. It is extracting the entire, whatever we have said in the first line. So that mind which has been temporarily quietened down by the practice of pranayama is adaha. That adaha, what happens? Nasham eti. So the word nasham is now being used. Permanently destroyed. That mind is permanently dissolved, permanently destroyed. Eka chintanat. Eka chintanam means vichara, inquiry. Ekaha means on that one ultimate reality. So concentration on that Eka reality, which is Atma, Eka Chintanat, Atma Vicharaha. By Atma Vicharaha, which is by Jnana Yoga, that ignorant mind gets destroyed. Okay, so in simple English, the mind is temporarily resolved by the control of the breath and gets permanently destroyed, permanently resolved by inquiry on the Atma, on the consciousness principle. So two portions. Actually, as you can see, this particular verse of Ramana Maharishi, it captures the entire essence of all that we have studied. That is Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Shravanam, Mananam, and Nidhyasana. All are covered in this one simple line, one simple verse. To that Prana Bandhanam, is of course Ashtanga Yoga, which has been the focus in the last 2 3 verses. But it is to be accompanied by all the other disciplines. And once that mind has been quietened down, which we call Chitta Shuddhi, then you have to focus on Jnanam, Atma Vichara, Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, and therefore the mind gets destroyed. So we have to understand these words very carefully. This mind is to be taken as that mind which gives us problems. That mind which is a source of my troubles, the problematic mind. So when do we say the mind is problematic? Why do we say that? Because what are my thoughts? I am this body. I am subject to birth. I am subject to disease. I am subject to death. And I am being thrown here and there in the ocean of samsara. And therefore, my firm knowledge is I am finite. Okay. Now the thing is, subconsciously, I am aware somewhere far deep down, I'm aware that I am Brahman. Though I'm, subconsciously I'm aware. That conscious knowledge is not there. And that subconscious subconscious awareness that I am Brahman leads me to want Purnatvam. I want to be infinite. Which is why, people get married, because they think that children will, because of children, they will live on after they are gone. So that's one of the reasons for getting married. We always keep saying you must keep your family going. That is this particular thing. I want to be infinite. I want never to go away. And because I'm associating my body as myself, I think I'll be gone when I'm dead. My body is dead. I want people to remember me. And all this is basically wanting, apurnatvam. And because of that little voice somewhere which tells me that no, you are actually Purnaha, that I'm constantly trying to be Purnaha. So this is the whole cycle. That sense of apurnatvam triggers in me a desire to be Purnam, to be complete. And my mind is open outwards, and my mind is extroverted, and therefore I think that I can be Purnam by acquiring more things, by acquiring things which I don't have, and disposing of things which I don't like. That is the constant, karma which is happening. So this is the root of karma. Apurnatvam, desire to be Purnam, leads to karma, acquisition and disposition of things. And again, I don't stop to think that whatever I acquire is again finite. So even if I acquire what I think I want to acquire, I need to acquire more, because the urge to acquire never stops as long as the things which I acquire are finite. And until one comes to Shastram, one does not know what is the infinite. One does not know how destructive this apurnatvam, kamaha, and karma is going to be. And therefore, if you remember Shankara's verse, angam galitam palitam mundam nashana vihinam jatam tundam. Where did we come across that?
Bhajagovindam.
Bhajagovindam. So you remember that, right? Angam galitam. This body has become old and weak. Mundam palitam. Your hair has turned gray or has become bald. And jatam tundam. That mouth has become dashana vihinam, without teeth. And yet what happens? Vruddho yati grahitva dandam. The body is so weak that this person goes around grahitva dandam. He has to hold a stick to keep himself erect. Even then, tadapina munchati asha pindam. Even though body is incapable of enjoying sense pleasures, that person is not able to release his grip, munchati, on asha pindam, on the bundle of hopes and desires. So the maturity which a person should have achieved with the, maturity of his body, that mental maturity has never come. He has never understood that desires can never be satisfied by fulfilling them. Desires are like fire. The more you fulfill them, the stronger it goes. Now, If you look at our environment, and it's not just now, it has been throughout the ages, what does the world tell you? Never be satisfied, never be content. Doesn't it say that? Because once you are content, then you have no motivation to do anything. And since you have no motivation to do anything, where is the growth for you? So this is the constant drivel which is being hammered home into you through your TV programs, even your MBA courses. They tell you the same thing: fire in your belly. You must always want to do things and want to do things and want to do things. The moment you say that, no, I'm okay, then the problem is that you will stop growing. You know. So there is a story. I don't know if you are aware. There's a chap from Harvard. He comes to India and he's walking on the beach. When he finds one man who is lying under a tree and playing some music on a guitar or on a flute. So this man is wondering, this MBA graduate, he's the fire in the belly person, right? So he tells this fellow, what are you doing? So he says, I'm sitting and playing my flute. So then he says, okay, let me teach you how to make flutes. So this fellow says, I already know because I made this flute myself. So he said, yeah, but let me teach you how to make that into a mainstream activity, how to generate maybe 1,000 flutes every day. So that chap who was playing the flute, he thought for some time, then he said, okay, so you will teach me how to make 1,000 flutes a day, and then what will I do with that? So he said, you sell them. Then he said, then what? Then you have more money. And then he said, then what? Then he said, then you invest more and make 10,000 flutes a day. So again, this fellow said, then what? So he said, like that, at some point of time, by the time you're 45 or 50 or whatever, you will be manufacturing 100,000 flutes a day and selling them. And imagine. So he says, imagine what? He says, that much money that you have. So he said, what will I do with the money? So the MBA graduate thinks this fellow is a real hard case. So he says, all that money, you can retire and come onto the beach and play your favorite music. What did that fellow say?
I'm
I'm
already
already
doing
doing
that.
that. I'm already doing that.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm doing now. Why do you want me to do all this karma? Well, I'm doing what I want, and after spending so much of my energy in doing what you are saying, I will still do that same thing. So this MBA graduate thinks this guy doesn't grow, but this guy says, no, I'm content. Vedanta tells you the exact opposite of what the world tells you. The world tells you, you do not be content. If you are content, you will not grow. Vedanta says, no, be content, because you will never be able to grow as long as your mind is disturbed. As long as you are not content, you will never be able to grow. Vedanta's advice is exactly the opposite. And here we have to understand that when we talk about the problematic mind, it is the ignorant mind which is the problematic mind. The knowledgeable mind can never be a problematic. And therefore, to remove samsara, I have to remove ignorance. And removing ignorance means what? I am replacing it with knowledge. I am replacing it with jnana. So jnana yoga, shravanam, mananam, nididhyasanam, it leads to an enlightened mind, which leads to permanent liberation. This destruction of the problematic mind and replacement of that problematic ignorant mind with an enlightened mind, with a mind which has knowledge, that is called manonashaha over here. The destruction of the mind is referring to that process where the ignorant mind is replaced by the mind with knowledge. But to reach there, to be able to do Shravanam and Mananam, you require a quiet mind. You require Chitta Shuddhi. And that is why Maharishi says, Prana Bandhana Leena Manasa. By pranayama, you should quieten the mind temporarily. You should attain Chitta Shuddhi. And then Adaha, that mind which has been quietened temporarily, Eka Chintanat, by contemplation on the non-dual Atma, by Atma Vichara, by Shravanam, Mananam, and Nidhyasanam, Eti Nasham. That mind is destroyed. See, all the problems in the mind are because of ignorance. And all the problems of samsara are a product of ignorance. Jnana Yoga will not destroy the mind. It will replace the ignorant mind with an enlightened one, with a knowledgeable one. That is called Manonashaha. We must always remember that whenever these words are used in scriptures, Manonashaha, there is no destruction of the mind. There is no real destruction of the mind. If the mind is really destroyed, what will happen? Mind is subtle body. That subtle body is required for every single activity of yours, from blinking your eyelids when you wake up, to brushing your teeth, to having a breakfast, anything that you do in the day, the subtle body is required. And if you have a doubt about that, then you know from Shastram that when subtle body leaves, what happens to the physical body? It dies. And therefore, one has to understand these kind of terms, usage of these kind of words in the Shastram very carefully. Otherwise, total confusion results. And there are people who have, literally interpreted Manonashaha as the mind not being available, making that mind not available to you. So there has been people who have propounded this philosophy earlier, that Hinduism says, Vedanta says, that if you want liberation, you have to destroy your mind. Or in that, at least in the interpretation will be that you have to enter a state where the mind is not available to you. There is only one natural state where the mind is not available to you, and that is Sushupti Avastha, right? Now, Sushupti Avastha, of course, everybody goes through every day, so that is not considered as something which leads to liberation. Why? Because Sushupti Avastha is associated with Ajnana, with ignorance. And therefore, there have been interpretations which have said that you do something, some experiment you do, some process you do, where your mind is no longer available to you. And this leads to all sorts of stupid experiments, LSD, other hallucinatory drugs, where the mind simply stops functioning because of the effect of these chemicals. And all this is done in the name of Vedic teaching. So there is a problem. You have to understand things very, very carefully and understand them as Shastra intended them to be understood, not as some new age guru who wants to experiment with mind altering drugs. All this we should avoid very carefully. Shastram gives a very, very high importance to the mind, because the mind is the very instrument through which jnanam is obtained. Okay. So now please unmute yourself and we can chant the 15th verse. Nashtamanasa utkrishta yoginaha
नष्टमानसा उत्कृष्टयोगिनः
कृत्यमस्ति किं स्वस्थितिं यतः
कृत्यमस्ति स्वस्थितिं यतः.
Okay. So, Nashta Manasaha Utkrishta Yoginaha Krityam Kim Asti and Swasthithim Yataha. Those are the word breakups. Then Utkrishta Yoginaha. Okay, now the Visarga at the end of the Yoginaha or Yogina indicates that it is the first case, Prathama Vibhakti, indicating that it is the name given to that person. Utkrishta Yoginaha, the greatest yogi. Utkrishtam is the superior, most superior. Utkrishta, superior. Yogi is yogi. So Utkrishta Yoginaha, the superior yogi, is who? Nashta Manasaha, the one whose mind has been destroyed. And you have to recall the last verse, the one whose troublesome mind has been replaced by the mind with jnana. So that is the greatest yogi. And what is so great about him? Swasthitim yataha, he abides in his Atma Swarupam, his inner self, which is Atma or Brahman. And for such a person, Ramana Maharshi says, Krityam Kim Asti. What is there to be accomplished? What action has now to be performed? Okay. Performed for what? Performed for the sake of fulfillment, for the sake of Purnatvam, which is another way of saying that this man, this yogi, has already achieved Purnatvam because Nashta Manasaha. Utkrishta Yogi, he is the greatest yogi. Why? Nashta Manasaha. His problematic mind has been replaced with the mind with knowledge, which means the mind is now a friend. It is no longer a problem. It's an ally. It's a asset to him. And swastathim yataha, he has understood that he is Brahman alone, and therefore he abides in Atma Swarupam. For a person who is understood and who is aware that he is Brahman, what action remains to be performed? Krityam kim asti. Why does anybody perform any action at all? We saw out of apurnatvam, the kama arises. Out of kama, karma arises. So everybody performs actions either for peace or for security or for happiness. And because for all these, we look outside us. Our mind is focused outside us. But this jnani, he has discovered that he is the very source. Peace, security, and happiness are all inside me. Therefore, he no longer has to do anything for his happiness. It doesn't mean that the jnani will sit idle and do nothing. But that is not the purport of this verse. The verse says he doesn't have to do anything, but you have to understand for his own purnatvam, because he's already purnaha. And therefore, all his activity, whatever activity he does, will happen according to his own prarabdha. Some people will be active, some people will be in caves, some people will teach, some people will not teach. So his activity is dependent upon his prarabdha alone, because prarabdha is applicable to the body. But all that activity will be karma abhasa, as if karma, because it is not born out of apurnatvam, it is born out of purnatvam. He is doing it out of happiness, not for happiness. And therefore, nothing has to be done for himself. And when somebody does nothing for his own nature, he is doing things for the benefit of others. He has become a very compassionate person. That is one definition of a jnani. He has to become a very, very compassionate person. Then the question is, how is this self-inquiry, this Atma Vichara to be conducted? That Maharishi says in the 16th verse. So we will chant it. So please unmute yourself and let us chant this verse. Drishyavaritam chittamatmanaha
दृश्यवादितं चित्तमात्मनः
Tvadarshanam Tatvadarshanam
चित्तदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं.
So this is a particular prakriya called Drik Drishya Viveka. There is actually a text which has been written by, some people say Vidyaranya, some people say Shankaracharya. There's some slight dispute about who the author is, but anyway, leaving that aside, it's a beautiful little text which we have done once. I don't know how many of you were there for that, but any of you present for that? Drishya Viveka?
Yes, sir. We were present. We were too
Yes,
new to
Acharya.
the subject.
Okay, some of you were there. Good. So then so Drik Drishya Viveka is a prakriya, it's a technique. So, and this is the technique which is being followed, which is being pointed out in this verse. First, look at the verse, words, Drishya Paritam Chittam Atmanaha. So, Drishya Paritam Chittam Atmanaha Chitpa Darshanam Tattva Darshanam. Okay. So, Drishya Varitam, the Chittam Atmanaha, with the knowledge of the Atma, with the self-knowledge, with Atma Jnanam, what does the Chittam do? So, here you have to supply. Atmanaha here indicates that Atma Jnanam has been obtained. So, Atma Jnanam, with that Atman, when you say Atmanaha, you have to say supply here is equivalent to having obtained Atma Jnanam. That word Atmanaha has to be expanded to mean that having obtained Atma Jnanam, Chittam, the mind, what does it do? Drishya Varitam. Drishya means the whatever you see. And whatever you see is the entire world, including your body, mind, and senses. So your body, mind, senses, every sense object in the world, and the whole world itself is covered by drishya. Now this text, it talks about two things, the drik and drishya. So drik is the one who sees, and drishyam is the what is seen. So that is why this particular terminology being used. The drik is the seer, the observer. Drishyam is the seen, the observed. And the observed includes the entire universe, including your body and mind and sense objects and senses and everything, right? So, chittam, atmanaha, with this atmanyanam, the mind, drishyavaritam, it negates all the drishyams. It negates all the seen, experienced objects as what? As mithya. And therefore, chitva darshana. This is the understanding of one's own consciousness as the seer, as myself the seer, myself the observer. Chitva darshanam. I am looking at chitta, myself as the consciousness principle, and chitva darshanam, tattva darshanam. Tattvam here is reality. Therefore, understanding that I am the consciousness principle is the understanding of the reality of Brahman, reality of Atma. That's what it means. So with self-knowledge, the mind negates all the observed objects. The mind withdraws from the world. And this is the vision of Chittam, consciousness. And that vision of consciousness is also the vision of reality. Literal word translations. Now let's look at a little more detailed explanations. So if you remember, I said in the first opening of this text that there are two parts, the first 15 verses and then the last 15 verses. The first 15 verses was the preparatory part. What was that? If you remember, verses number 1 to 6 was Karma Yoga, 7 to 9 was Upasana Yoga, 10 to 12 was Ashtanga Yoga, and 13 to 14 was Jnana Yoga. Right? 15 was the intermediary verse. So we have finished the first part, the preparatory part in the first 15 verses. Now comes the crux, the essence of Jnana Yoga, the self-inquiry part, which is in the last 15 verses. And like all Jnanam, any self-inquiry, any discussions on Jnana Yoga is slightly abstract, not so concrete as karma and upasana and all that. And therefore, it has to be taken as a summary or a condensation of the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas. And that is why it's called Upadesha Saram. Saram is the essence, Upadesham is the Vedantic teaching. So this particular text, Upadesha Sara, because of the second portion, which is the condensation of Jnana Kanda. Now, there are two basic principles in Vedanta. I have said this before in Gita classes also, and I repeated this in Upanishad class also, but I am repeating it here. Vedanta has two very basic principles which have to be understood and which are being conveyed in this particular section now. What is the first principle? I, the experiencer, am different from whatever I experience. The first principle you have to understand. The drik is always different from the drishyam. The experiencer consciousness is different from whatever is experienced, the object of experience. That has to be understood very clearly. And therefore, that is why he says, Chitta Atmanaha. With this Atmanaha, with this Atmajnanam, the Chittam does what? Drishya Varitam. It negates the Drishya. Varitam is basically means withdraw or to hide. So it negates, it hides from the Drishyam. It withdraws from the Drishyam. It negates the Drishyam as Mithya. And the principle here is we use a technique called Neti Neti. Neti Neti is a technique where you examine every object that you see and then decide, is this me or not? For example, the world, of course, it's very simple to say the world is not me. So Neti, na iti. This Neti Neti is not the Neti you do in in your kriyas. This is na iti, na iti. So na iti means not this. And therefore, if you're looking at the world, you're going to say na iti. This world is not me. Okay. I'm inquiring, right? Who am I? So I'm saying this world is not me. And then what do you see? Then you see your hands. And you say, no, the hands are not me. They belong to me, but they are not me. And then you go on one by one. Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha. Each one of them you say naiti, until you negate one by one, until you come to the one non-negatable thing, which is what? The drik. So the consciousness principle, or we can call it the Sakshi Chaitanyam, which is the drik. When you come to the drik, that drik is the observer, the subject. And that subject you cannot negate. Why can you not negate? Because it is you yourself, and nobody can negate himself. Therefore, one by one, using the principle of neti, everything is negated. And finally, you come to yourself, the Sakshi Chaitanyam, which you cannot negate. And that's how you understand that this Sakshi Chaitanyam I have. That's what it means. Atmanaha with Atmajnanam. Drishyavaritam. I withdraw, I negate all the external world and its objects, including my body, including my 5 koshas, until I come to myself, the consciousness principle. So that is the first principle. I, the experiencer, am different from the objects that I experience. First principle of Vedanta. Then there is a second very important principle. That is, any attribute, any guna which I experience always belongs to the experienced object and never to me, the experiencer. So 2 principles of Vedanta, if you remember carefully, you would have understood Vedanta to a very large extent. The first one is, I am the experiencer, the subject, and I am different from whatever I experience, the object. So I, the drik, am different from the drishya. And second principle is, any attribute, any guna that I experience belongs to the drishyam and not to me, the drik. Every experienced attribute belongs to the anatma that I experience. Never belongs to me, the experiencer, the atma. Because I am nirakaraha, I am formless, nirgunaha, attributeless, chaitanyam, consciousness principle. So from this, you can understand that really speaking, if I have to transcend moksha, I mean, transcend samsara and get moksha, as long as I think that I am the body, I will never get that moksha. So, but transcending this form that I have, this body that I have, that is the real transformation. That is real moksha. Why? Because I am consciousness. I am free from all attributes, including space. Even Akasha, I am free from, because Akasha itself is located in me. So I am all pervading. And since I, the consciousness, am free of space, and I, the consciousness, am also free from the attribute of time. So 2 things I'm free of. Attribute of space I don't have. Attribute of time I don't have. That is what is meant by all pervading. Free from desha and kala. So neither restricted by spatial boundaries, nor restricted by time-wise boundaries. I have always been there. I am here, and I will continue to be here. That is the attribute of not being restricted by time-wise boundaries. And I am everywhere, and everything is within me. That is the attribute of being not restricted by space-wise boundaries. So spatial and temporal boundaries I don't have. And this all-pervading, formless, attributeless, pure consciousness principle, I am, is my higher nature. And when I can remember this, not in class, I mean, in class also, obviously, but when I can remember this all the time, that is called abiding in this Chaitanya. Today, for example, somebody asks you, even in the middle of the night, who are you? You will give your name and you will say, I'm a boy or a girl. That is abiding in the anatma. When that same effortless ease, when somebody asks you, without having to consciously recall the teaching, when the spontaneous response is, I am Brahman, that is called abiding in Atmajnanam, abiding in this Chaitanyam, and that is called Jivan Mukti. Remember that for the purpose of any worldly transaction, you have to use the body-mind complex, right? That you have to use. But that's a conscious use, knowing fully well that it is not you. What are you? I am that Nirguna Nirakara Sakshi Chaitanya. So Chitva Darshanam. This is the understanding of that Nirguna Nirakara Sakshi Chaitanyam as me, as I am. And that alone is Tattva Darshanam. That alone is the real truth. So I am the only truth of this world and all its objects. And you must recall the 5 principles of consciousness, which we again and again and again do, because it is so very important. What are they? I am not a part. I am not a product. I am not a property of this body. I am not limited by the limitations of the body, which means I am kala aparichinnaha, desha aparichinnaha, not limited by space, not limited by time. Then the third one is being different from the body is able to survive because of my presence alone. Because I am present and the body is present in me, that is why this body has life. And the fourth one is when this body dies, I will continue to survive. And the fifth one is this surviving I, the consciousness principle, cannot be recognized after the body dies, because the reflecting medium is no longer present. And when the reflecting medium is no longer present, the reflected consciousness is no longer present. It is only the reflected consciousness which can be recognized by somebody else, never the original consciousness. And if I remember these principles, then life becomes a game for me. If you forget these principles, life becomes a burden for you. Okay, we'll stop for a minute. Any questions? Yeah, Anjali.
Raviji, I
Yes.
have a few doubts. One is that when one really knows that they have transcended the space, the time, everything, then will there be need to remember these things? Because they know, like they don't need to remember it, right?
That when I say constantly aware of, it means in the same manner as today you know what is your cell number. You know, if I ask you what's your cell number, Anjali, you don't have to think. But if you ask me, I have to think. Okay, I don't remember. But most people, at least their names, it's available immediately as part of your subconscious level, not conscious level. So today at subconscious level, it is that I am a girl and my name is Anjali. That has to be replaced by I am Brahman. And that subconscious level thought of I am a girl gets replaced by I am Brahman. And when you now transact, you will consciously use, okay, I am this girl who is going to interact. The process is reversed. For transactions, you consciously recall that yes, you are operating through a human body.
Yeah, then I will remember that I'm a girl, because I have to remember
You have
that.
to remember for the transaction, yes.
Yeah, right.
But
Okay.
at your subconscious level, you are Brahman.
Okay. Other doubt I had was when you said that when you transcend the space, the time, how do we transcend it?
You are transcending it simply by saying, by understanding that you are Brahman, and Brahman is beyond time and beyond space. Why is it beyond time? Because Brahman was never born and Brahman will never die. And of course, time is a construct of creation. Time and space, they both appear only when creation starts.
Yes.
There is no question of what time will creation start. That question cannot be asked because the time starts to tick. Time zero starts to tick when the first creation happens. When creation is destroyed, then there is no time. Time doesn't function. Space is not there. Time is not there. Only Brahman is there. And the world is there in potential form only. And therefore, you cannot ask when. Once the world starts, then only time starts. This is something incidentally accepted by science also. That before the Big Bang, there is no question. There is no construct of time or space.
Right. And the third doubt I had was when you said about the problematic mind is replaced by a knowledgeable mind. Which part of mind is problematic exactly?
I am Anjali is a very problematic mind.
I was trying to think, I was trying to think in the sense of the 4 parts of the mind that we studied in Tattvabodha.
I'm this using the mind means buddhi and mind are being Vijnanamaya Kosha basically is being talked about. And of course the Manomaya Kosha also is being talked about. Because Manomaya Kosha has emotions, Vijnanamaya Kosha has got reasoning faculties, which can be reasoning wrongly also, right? So all the problems belong to these 2 koshas.
So that does not include Chitta and Ahankara?
Ahankara is very much a problem because Ahankara says I am the body-mind complex.
Right.
Chitta is a memory, subconscious memory can also be a problem. Therefore, we say mind in general, subtle body, sukshma sharira. So when you have the knowledge that you are Brahman established, then all these things, they don't go away, your problems don't go away. But they become, insignificant in front of this large looming fact that you are the mind. It's like a bulb. A bulb is still on in daylight, but you don't notice it.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes, Pandana.
Acharya.
Pandana is there, just one second. Let's Pandana say.
I have a little terminology confusion. When we say Drik Dishya, are we equating Drik to the Sakshi Chaitanyam?
Yes. Drik means the observer.
Right. So this is like one of the instances where translation fails, no?
Yeah, that's why translation is not a good idea in these cases.
Yeah, because like I was getting because when you say like from Nirvana Sharakam Aham Bhojanam Neva Bhojanna Bhokta.
Yeah.
You can't say I'm the seer or the experiencer.
No,
or the
you can't. Here it is a Sakshi Chaitanyam, the one who is finally lending the power to the mind to see. That is why Drigdrishit Viveka was very important because it talks about 3 levels, it talks about the mind and the objects, and the Sakshi Chaitanyam and the mind. So those levels we talk about.
Thank you.
Yes, Rinkuji.
Acharya, this is with respect to the 5th principle of consciousness. I cannot be recognized after death because the reflecting medium is not there. So people who see me as the RC.
People don't know. People see, if you are being seen as the RC, the reflecting medium is very much there.
Yes, but then people, so if you are the OC, then you won't see your body, mind, intellect at all, is it?
No, they're not talking about you. See, RC has to be there for it to be recognized. Life, RC here basically means life, the jiva, the consciousness which you see in my talking, in your talking, that consciousness, that what you call recognition of the fact that OC is present is a anumanam. You cannot,
we presume that the OC.
There is no pratyaksha operation by which you can see OC. Because
right.
You are seeing the RC operate. You are talking means you are conscious. Your mouth is moving means you are conscious. That RC, from that RC, I draw inference that OC is there. That is how OC is understood.
Yes, but for the person, for the one, for like say, I'm trying to understand, I'm Brahman. I am Brahman is still a thought. I am Brahman.
No, it
But
is not.
OC.
It is not. I am Brahman is a thought for the Jiva, for the RC. Brahman has no capability to think.
Okay.
That I'm telling you, these sort of concepts need to be again and again. You cannot say that Brahman says, I am Brahman. Brahman cannot talk. What will he talk with?
That is what I'm asking.
He has to have a mind and body to talk with. That is why you are saying that without the reflecting medium, the OC cannot be recognized. There is no way of recognizing the OC excepting through the operation of the RC. And the recognition is not for you. Remember, when you say OC, it is not you Rinku OC. You know, there is no Rinku OC. There's only one OC.
OC.
And Rinku is a RC. Our OC being reflected in your body mind complex is the RC, and that is Rinku. Therefore, if XYZ is the RC, as XYZ's RM, the body dies away, what is being said is that RC which was XYZ is no longer recognizable. But it doesn't mean that OC is not there. Don't take it as Brahman recognizing himself.
That is what was the confusion. Because
That is not. Brahman has no mind to work with. Brahman has no mind to work with.
Yes.
And therefore, no operation is there in Brahman.
Okay. Thank you, Acharya. Thank you.
Okay. So, no other questions? Right. We still have some time, so we can go on to verse number 17. So please chant with me. Manasam tu kim margane krite.
Manasam
Naiva manasam marga arjavat. Okay. So, Kim Margane Krite. The second half of the first line. Kim Margane Krite. What is the source of? And Manasam tu. This mind. Okay, what is the source of this mind? So what you have to add here? Enquire in this manner. Kim Margane Krite Manasam. What is the source of this mind? You have to inquire. And when that is the first line says you have to do the inquiry in this manner. Which manner? What is the source of this mind? Okay. And the second is the first half of the second line is the result. The result of the inquiry, which is Naiva Manasam. There is no such mind. That is the result of the inquiry of Margane Kriti. Okay. So first you inquire what is the source of this mind, and instead of discovering the source, you discover that there is no mind. Nothing called mind is there, you discover. And Margam Arjavat. Argam Arjavat means this is the direct path to reality. This is the shortest and most direct path to moksha. There is the. So in English, when a person inquires what is the source of the mind, you will find that there is no such thing as the mind itself. Forget about the source. This is the direct path to moksha. It's a very, very important verse, a little technical. It's telling us how this self-inquiry has to be done. Okay. So the first, thing to be understood is that normally when we talk about, let us say, this table or this let us say flask or this light, right? What is the assumption? That flask is there only for you, or it is there for everybody?
For everyone.
For everyone, right? The normal thing is that the world exists for everybody, right? But Vedanta turns that whole thing upside down. He says that is a wrong concept. Vedanta says the whole world exists for you as long as you perceive it. The whole world depends for its existence upon your perception. Which is another way of saying that the existence of the world is dependent upon your perception of the world. And you can draw a corollary. If you are not perceiving a part of this world, then for you, that world, that part of the world is as good as non-existent. Now it may sound very, illogical, but let us say there is some, place in, say far off Africa, very remote place about which nothing is known, to you at least. Does that place exist for you? In your mind, does that place exist? It doesn't exist.
No.
Which is another way of saying is that, supposing for example, there is somebody, a friend of yours who is living abroad or somewhere, and something happens to him, he falls sick, and the news does not reach you. Then as far as you are concerned, that event has not occurred at all, has it not? But you don't know about it, so the event has not occurred. And therefore, Vedanta says the world can affect you only when it is within the range of your sensory organs. Only when your jnanendriyas can perceive the world, then only can it affect you. So existence depends upon the perception by yourself, the drik. The existence of the drishyam depends upon the perception of the drishyam by the drik. How does this perception take place? It takes place in the form of vritti, thought. So this is the flow. Some object in the world does not exist for you until such time as it is perceived. That perception takes place in the form of your vritti, your thoughts. And further concluding, therefore, put all those statements together, the existence of any object is dependent upon your thoughts. And you have to expand it to say that the existence of the world itself is therefore dependent upon your thoughts, which makes it what? A dependent reality. Because it depends upon your thoughts for its existence. And anything which has a dependent existence is not real, is mithya. Right? So far so good. Now, vrittis, thoughts, are of two types. We saw this in Atma Bodha. What are the two vrittis? Atma Bodha, you have to recall. Idam vritti and aham vritti. Idam vritti and aham vritti. Idam literally means this, and this means anything in front of you. So any object, when you cognize it, it is called idam vritti. And therefore, since there are many objects in front of you, idam vrittis are many in number. But that idam vritti is recognized only if you are conscious, which is the aham vritti, the I thought. Until the I am thought is there, the table is thought cannot come. You agree?
Yes.
Until the I am thought is there, the table is, or Anjali is, or Aditi is, or Aruna is, none of these thoughts can come. It has to be necessarily preceded by I am. And therefore, any idam vritti, which is table is, glass is, all these thoughts, any idam vritti can be there only if there is aham vritti. There are many objects, there are many idams in this world. Therefore, idam vrittis can be multiple. But aham is only one, therefore aham vritti is only one. And therefore the conclusion here is idam vritti depends upon aham vritti for existence. So this aham vritti is basically first person. I am, right? English grammar, I am. Without the first person, you are cannot come. He is cannot come. That is cannot come. So first person, I am. Second person, I am is aham vritti. Second person, you are idam vritti. Third person, he is idam vritti. Object, that is idam vritti. The second and third person can exist only if the first person exists. Therefore, idam vritti can exist only if aham vritti exists. And that is what the argument which we made. The world, which is idam vritti, can exist only if I have thoughts, which is aham vritti, which is various world thoughts, idam vrittis, only can exist if I am there. The I thought, if it is there, then only the world exists. What is the proof? When the I thought is not there, the world does not exist for you. When is that?
Sushupti avastha.
Deep
I
sleep.
thought is not there. We would rather use the word Sushupti avastha because deep sleep and all, highly confusing. You can be sleeping deeply and dreaming also, right? Therefore, we say Sushupti avastha, the I thought is not there. Since the I thought is not there, the aham vritti is not there, itam vrittis are not supported. And therefore, in the Sushupti avastha, you don't know anything about the world. So when one wakes up, the aham vritti comes, and therefore the world comes into existence. All the idam vrittis also come. The principle is the aham vritti is also dependent upon something else. Aham vritti is dependent upon our original consciousness, the I. So you have idam vritti dependent upon aham vritti. Aham vritti is reflected. Therefore, it is dependent upon the original consciousness, which is the Atma. Remember that the aham vritti cannot be the OC. Why?
Because it's a vritti.
No. Is the aham vritti there all the time, or does it come and go?
It comes and goes.
When?
Hamza.
Shuddhi.
Correct. In Sushupti avastha, aham vritti is not there. When you wake up, it is there. Therefore, aham vritti is subject to arrival and departure. It cannot be the OC because OC is always there. OC is never subject to arrival and departure. Aham vritti is a product of the RC. OC is the original consciousness upon which aham vritti is dependent. And therefore, this whole journey of ours, the Atma Vichara of ours, this Jnanam journey of ours, will start with idam vritti, the objects of the world. From idam vritti, you have to travel backwards to aham vritti, which is the RC or the ahankara. From ahankara, you have to travel to OC, the consciousness principle which you are. And therefore, Ramana Maharshi says, Manasam to kim. What is this idam vritti? Margane kriti, inquire in this manner. When you inquire in this manner, what do you find? Naiva manasam. There is no idam vritti at all, because all idam vrittis are dependent upon aham vritti. Therefore, you will have to dismiss all the idam vrittis as not being real. They are mithya only. Whenever one inquires into any object in the world, you can inquire into your table, into your chair, into your husband, into your wife, you will find that all those objects are reduced to a bunch of vrittis in you, which is called the mind. And when one inquires into the mind, that mind disappears into aham vritti. When you inquire into the aham vritti, that aham vritti is also mithya because it has a dependent existence on the original consciousness. And because of this kind of Enquiry, which takes you straight from idam vritti to aham vritti to OC. It will take you to moksha directly. And that is what is said here, that it is the direct path, the short path. And the inquiry has 3 stages. First stage, you take the whole universe and then you reduce it to idam vrittis. Okay, this is not mentioned in by Ramana Maharishi because he takes it for granted that we know this. So first stage, you take any object of the universe, you take the whole universe itself and reduce all the universe, all the entire universe by analysis into idam vrittis. How do you do that? I know this particular object because of the thought in my mind. The idam vritti is there. I know the glass because of glass vritti. I know the pot because of pot vritti. So this is reduction of the whole universe into particular object vritti. Second stage is that you know by analysis that the idam vritti cannot exist independent of aham vritti. Because aham vritti is the first person. And if you have to have a idam vritti, you have to be aware of yourself, which is aham vritti. And then when you inquire into the nature of this aham vritti, you will find that the idam vritti first disappears into the aham vritti, and because it has got no independent existence. And then the aham vritti disappears into the OC. The mind also disappears on inquiry. The mind continues to exist, of course, for daily transaction. But now you know that the mind is dependent upon me, the OC, and is not an independent entity. You know that aham vritti pervades all idam vritti. You know that, therefore you know that the mind itself does not exist separately. So all idam vrittis have aham vritti as the base, as the support. And therefore any idam vritti that you have can be reduced to aham vritti. This aham vritti is the ahankara or the RC. When you inquire into the RC, you will find that RC depends also upon OC. And therefore, idam vritti reduces to aham vritti, which reduces to OC. So to put in other words, inquiry into the world leads you to an inquiry into the thoughts, which are your mind. Inquiry into your mind leads you to inquiry into Atma. This idea is also given in Drik Drishya Viveka, which we will continue with this verse, because there is one of the verses in Drik Drishya Viveka, which is a very important verse as far as understanding this idea is concerned. And for those who have done the DDV, it is the 11th verse which you can revise. We will pick this up in the next class. Any questions are most welcome. It's a technical subject. So if you've not understood, just give it some time, think about it, and we'll explain more in the next class.
Acharya?
Yes, please.
Is it a bit like saying the dream world exists for me, the waker, only in terms of my thoughts?
The dream world exists for the dreamer. It is real for the dreamer. But for the waker, it is not real. But yes, you can say that I saw the dream world, but it existed when? As long as I was in a dream. So in my thoughts, in the dream, your thoughts as a dreamer, not as a waker. It is the waker alone who projects the dreamer as well as the dream world. Remember that. The waker does not know that he has converted himself into the dreamer, but he projects the dreamer. And that dreamer is projecting the dream world as well as himself.
So in the aham vritti, like just stretching that example, for the dreamer was, that was the reality. I'm the dreamer. And the aham vritti on waking up changed to I'm the waker. So it has to eventually change to Aham Brahmasmi.
That's one way, but Ahamvriti essentially is Ahankara. That sense of, I am which you have, that I exist. The dreamer also will have that in the dream world, but he will have it as I am the dreamer. That itself is mithya. And to draw from that example, you have to understand this I exist as the RC in the Jagrata Avastha is also mithya. Just as you are negating the dreamer, you have to negate the waker to finally arrive at Brahman.
Thank you.
Yes, Anjali?
I got a bit confused in the first principle that you mentioned of Vedanta, that experiencer is different from the experience.
Always.
Then, yeah, but I mean, yeah, this doubt came that also involves duality, right?
Of course, it is duality.
But we are going towards non-duality.
So you have not understood what is non-duality. Non-duality is never perceptual. Non-duality is always understanding one thing. You can see the sun rising, but does it rise?
No.
Perceptually, you are seeing the sun rising. So perception cannot negate understanding. Every perception of duality, in that perception of duality, your understanding has to be that there is non-duality. That is how you have to understand. You cannot perceive non-duality ever.
Okay, so basically, as long as the perception is as far as it is concerned, that statement holds true.
Perception duality is very much there.
Right.
There is
right.
you, there is a perceived.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just got confused. Now it's clear. Thank you.
All right.
Acharya.
As you said it, actually, that the RC upon inquiry and it becomes OC.
Upon inquiry, you find that RC ultimately resolves into the OC. It cannot become OC because it is the same as OC.
Sorry, I meant that, but I
It
used
resolves into OC. You will find that RC is nothing but OC.
Yes. Thank you.
That is the way we have to understand.
Yes.
Yes, John?
Acharya.
Oh.
My question was also related to the last question. Like in these 3 stages of inquiry, how do the aham vritti disappears into the OC? How does the RC realizes that is the OC?
That is your Shravanam, no? The whole process of Tattvabodha is telling you that only, that you are the RC. And when you inquire into the RC, what do you get? You get 3 entities. You get the RM, the OC, and there is a reflection of the OC onto the RM. So there are 3 entities. The RC basically resolves into 3 entities, which is the RM and the OC and the RC. And out of these 3, you have to analyze and find which is the independent entity. And then you find that RM is also dependent upon OC. RC is definitely dependent upon RM and the OC. Therefore, the independent entity is only OC. That is called the resolution. The understanding that the original consciousness will remain while the other 2 have gone. That is the resolution.
Thank you.
So that's the problem, these English words of resolution and dissolution and all these things. But then we can only explain.
Acharya, may I?
Yes, Tanmay, please go ahead.
Because these were confusions that even we had earlier on, starting off, which you resolve. And it's these words, like you just said, is transcendence and this and that, which
all those highly avoidable words.
Yeah. So and you keep saying that it is not an event in time that takes place, only an event in time. So this came from the Bhagavad Gita classes that you had taken for our batch.
Yeah.
Where you you clarified very nicely that to remember that Atma is already beyond the gunas. It already is.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to transcend anything.
It doesn't need to transcend anything. Yes.
Gunas are gunas. It cannot transcend itself.
Yes.
And what basically is required, the problem arises, the so-called problem arises because of ajnanam, wrong knowledge, and it is only that that wrong knowledge has to be corrected. Merely that is what the process is.
Yes, that is the process. And the difficulty is that even after knowing that I am Brahman, you know, it is not to remember that constantly, to be aware of that constantly. That is the real practice. See, Shravanam and Mananam over a period of maybe 10 years will definitely get you into this doubtless knowledge that I am Brahman. But in every moment of your life, to remember that, that's the more difficult thing. That requires constantly going over the teaching, recalling the teaching. That is Nididhyasana. Okay, so with this, thank you for your patience. We'll stop for today. Om Purnamada Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya.
That's it.
Thank you.